Hi there, fellow sea glass lovers. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Jackie, and today I'm going to show you some little sailboats. Now, last week I showed you a very large quilted piece that I did, and I put one little sailboat in it out in the water. It was probably about this size, but today I'm working really small. I love making these little cards. They're only 4 inches by 6 inches, and I put a little sailboat on it, and boom, it makes it so much more interesting. And then I give these away as gifts, or I sell them, and I make so many of them. So today I'll show you some of my sailboats. So this is 2 pieces of sea pottery and a piece of sea glass that I've done on this one. And I'll show you a few others. And then at the end, I'll go into my archives and I'll put together a bit of a playlist of a bunch of these little cards that have sailboats in them, just to give you some inspiration and ideas. So here's a piece that was just strips of fabric that I embellished a little bit with a few beads and a little bit of embroidery. And then I put a piece of sea pottery, a tiny piece of brown sea glass, and it makes all of a sudden it's a seascape with an interesting little sailboat out on the water. And then if I add a few more things, like I think I'll put a little bit of a rock and a piece of sea glass and a tiny little shell down here in the foreground, it will just make it that much more interesting again. So what I'm using, my quick seal adhesive caulk, which is the same thing I use for my sea glass on everything. It works fantastic on fabric. So I'm going to embellish these with a little bit more interesting pieces. So I'm always trying to do different things, but I don't like to do the same thing over and over. So I find with these, they're very small, but each one is very different and individual. So there I've got 2 sailboats. Now I think I'll do another one. This is another card that I have. Kind of cool. I've just got some different colors of fabric here, a little bit of beading. And I'm just going to put, just by putting a little boat there with a white sail out on the water, all of a sudden, to me, it looks like a seascape. So it only takes a tiny bit of embellishment to make this card that much more interesting. Now, the other thing I'm going to add here, because this to me reads like land, I'm going to put an akshak here. So a little person standing on the land looking out towards the water. So there you go. I just glue those pieces in place and it makes it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to show you another one. Now this is a piece I did that looks a bit like a wave coming up and a little bit of a horizon here. So I'm just going to take a sailboat here sitting on top of the horizon. That is a piece of driftwood and a piece of sea pottery, a beautiful piece of sea pottery. What I do find with these small cards, because they're so small, it's not like putting something in a mosaic where a special piece of sea glass or sea pottery might get a bit lost. I find that working small, you can really showcase some of your really special pieces. That's a beautiful piece of sea pottery. So I'm going to put a shell there, a little piece of white sea glass, and a little piece of brown sea glass. Just a little interesting thing. Now I have one more I'm going to show you. And this one is, you might think, not so interesting. It's just a bunch of fabric sewn together, a few little beads on there, a little bit of embellishments. But then if I take a shell, this is part of a clam shell, not too interesting, but you put it, the shape of it looks like the boat, like the hull of a boat, and then a really cool piece of green, put that there, And then I'm going to do another little sailboat and another little sailboat. So I'm going to have 3 little sailboats here, and it almost to me looks like there's a stream of water going through here, and these sailboats are all riding along this stream of water. So it only takes a tiny little sea treasure to turn something that might not be too interesting into something much more interesting. So I love doing these. So stay tuned, and I will put together a little bit of a slideshow for you of a number of my little sailboats. I hope you found this interesting, and until next time, I hope you make it out to the beach, and happy sea glass hunting.